All right, we've started. Okay, so welcome. Thanks everybody for joining. For those of you that are here interested in grants, it's kind of an exciting day because this is both project costing and grants day. Lots of project costing sessions. There was one before mine and there's one after. Oh, what happened to my presentation? Hold on. That was very strange. Okay, hopefully you can see my slide now. So first of all, I'm Jessica Mann from SpearMC. I specialize in grants management, been working with it, focusing on it for the past 19 years. And my mouse is going berserk. This is really weird. I wonder if another cord is hitting it. Apologize about that. Okay, be a little bit more careful. So yeah, in terms of PeopleSoft, grants management, project costing, contracts, billing, AR, commitment control. And today, unfortunately, Josh was not able to attend this session today. They had a recent go live, so the timing did not work out so well, but I'm going to go ahead and present all the slides to talk about the Temple story. So Temple Health had a need to move their grants from a third-party system into PeopleSoft for their Fox Chase Cancer Center business unit. And this third-party system was USL, and it not only managed their grants for post-award, but also had a labor distribution functionality. And Temple wanted to not only retire the USL system, but also improve the efficiency of financial consolidation and reporting, and bring that research and that grant data into a centralized location. So let's move to the agenda to talk about what you're going to learn about today. So first of all, let's start with some quick introductions. Then I do have one poll. I would love it if you guys would fill out. Then we'll talk about the options that Temple considered for implementing grants in PeopleSoft. We'll talk about what was the kind of the final product for grants at Temple, and some of our implementation lessons learned. I always think it's helpful to share those. And then lastly, the solution that they implemented for distributing their labor and performing effort reporting, and any Q&A. But meanwhile, if you do have questions, feel free to put them into the Pathable chat, and I have it open here. I will try to monitor it as I go. Okay. Oh, I guess actually we're moving to the poll first. So for the poll, if you could go into your poll section, it's actually the second one. The first one is just questions, which was the default, so I left that there. So the question is, how are you managing grants in PeopleSoft today? You click the vote now button and select utilizing the full grants management suite, utilizing grants management modules, but not the full functionality, using just project ID to track grants, or using another chart field. So we do often see this, for example, department ID, or you're not tracking grants in PeopleSoft at all. Okay, so go ahead and vote on behalf of Temple. Okay, and I believe you guys should be able to see the results dynamically. So what I'm seeing right here is lots of green. Oh, we aren't tracking grants in PeopleSoft. So the first one, the one in pink, that was me for Temple. And okay, so it looks like a lot of folks on the call who have, oh, we got one utilizing another chart field to track grants. So I'd be curious to know which one that is. Is it department ID, chart field 1? But looks like for the most part, people are not yet live using much in PeopleSoft for grants management. So I'm definitely going to try to incorporate some high-level information about PeopleSoft grants. Thank you for doing the chat. Okay, Temple Health is a major Philadelphia-based academic health system. They are live on both HCM and financials. You can see the list of financials modules below, and they are on PeopleTools 85692 image 20. So I've worked with them on the grants and labor distribution side of things over in financials. We've also done some nice work on the HCM side with them, and very pleased to report that Temple was recently selected as a PeopleSoft Innovator for process, functional innovations, and user experience. Please take a look at the PeopleSoft portal to check out the innovators. It's actually a really cool site to see, from a customer perspective, hear a customer story about new functionality that they've implemented, new or enhancements to the user experience. A little bit about SpearMC. We are an Oracle partner, and we focus on PeopleSoft. That is what we do. So that includes financials, HCM, supply chain, grants management, lease administration. We also offer managed services. We do a lot of training, people on the both functional and on the PeopleTools technical side. So obviously in the last couple of years, this has mainly been live virtual training. You can also buy training content directly from our website. So definitely that's one thing to check out. Kibana is one of those areas that we've been offering a lot and has a tendency to sell out. We also help with hosting on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, helping you implement PeopleSoft Test Framework. We can help with PUM updates and putting in roadmaps for you and other Oracle technologies. Okay, so we are headquartered out of the Bay Area, and now have coast to coast representation. Primarily our projects are, anywhere in the US, also Canada and some other international projects as well. We are very proud to be recognized by Gartner. So SpearMC is the sole featured PeopleSoft vendor in the latest 2022 Gartner Market Guide for Oracle Professional Services. And we also received our SOX 2 certification. Okay, so let's get into the story about Temple and going back to the very beginning of their process. Let's talk about the options that they considered for implementing grants in PeopleSoft. Oh, but before I go there, I did want to talk about kind of the delivered functionality of grants. Grants is not just a standalone module. Okay, so it just doesn't work independently. It really is a suite of modules. It's a solution that's a suite of modules, and it heavily integrates and uses the functionality of other modules, such as project costing, GL, contracts, and billing. So you do need all of these modules in blue in order to utilize the full functionality of grants. And each one really does have its own purpose. So this box over here, projects, represents project costing. In my mind, it's really kind of the heart of grants management. Here, you're going to store your detailed transactions for a grant. So that could be budget, it could be actuals, encumbrances, as incurred billable information. That's project costing. Of course, all of our accounting related to our grant will be integrated to the GL and summarized into the GL. You'll see a /KK here. KK is the abbreviation for commitment control. And commitment control, it is an optional feature, but commitment control allows you to track the remaining spending authority for your grant. So what is my budget? What are my actuals, encumbrances? How much do I have left to spend? And optionally, you can have some strict controls implemented with commitment control. So if you so elect to, if you go over 10% of your grant, you can stop a transaction and say, no, I'm not allowing this, you're overspent. So lots and lots of flexibility how you want to set up your commitment control, but it is designed to be used with grants management. This box here for contracts, it's the customer contracts, I should clarify. This module is responsible for automating the billing and revenue recognition for your grant. And then once that billing information is initiated by contracts, it's sent to billing, which can create that actual PDF invoice and also optionally email it directly to your sponsor. And then those invoices are loaded to receivables where you can track how much is still left to be paid by your sponsor. So very, very integrated solution. So as Temple looked into bringing those grants off of USL into PeopleSoft, they didn't initially own all of those grants modules. So they were considering, well, could we really, could we get by with using just project costing and commitment control? So definitely, there is a lot of features and functionalities with just those two things alone. And there are also some pros. But as we began working with them and talking with them, we really did encourage them to look at the full functionality of grants management. So the full use of the full modules, grants, project costing, contracts, commitment control, billing, and AR. And if that big bang of rolling out everything seemed to be too much, we also said, well, you really could have a phased rollout here, where we implemented the functionality for grants, project costing, contracts, and commitment control, and put in just the base configuration for billing and AR, but then roll out the full system billing and revenue recognition and receivable functionality in a later phase. So those were the three main ones that we were talking about. In terms of using just project costing and commitment control, one of the main pros there was less modules to license, but really there were other pros there too. Like, for example, that would have been a simpler implementation and perhaps quicker to implement, and less modules to support going forward. They didn't, their team didn't need to learn as many modules. But really, for those customers that are either using just a project ID or using just project costing, there really is some pain points and some holes, and you're not you have a tendency to do things more manual or have shadow systems. So you without grants, you would be unable to utilize a lot of the delivered fields that store grant demographic information that is really important for reporting purposes. You also don't get the delivered grants indirect overhead process. In PeopleSoft, this is called facilities and administration, a very robust process. Project costing does have pricing and the ability to create markups and overheads, but not the same way that it's specifically designed for grants using bases, that can be configured by your customer, total direct costs, modified total direct costs, and trees. So very robust. I definitely prefer this method over just the project costing pricing functionality. There's also other delivered features and grants are, more so around reporting. So milestone functionality or other grant reporting features that you wouldn't be able to utilize, as well as no automated system billing or very limited functionality around revenue processing if you just have PC. So ultimately, Temple did decide, okay, yes, we want to move forward with the full grant suite, and they were able to work with Oracle on getting some pricing for those new modules that work for them. And then the next question was, okay, do we want to go big bang, or do we want to do a phased rollout? So obviously with the big bang, making sure that all of the features were available right at go live, that would be great to have everything ready to go at go live, and all the testing, kind of could be done at one time, end to end. But it would be a longer time to go live, and compared to project costing and KK, more modules to license, as well as more functionality that would need to be learned. And for this particular business unit, they were not very familiar with PeopleSoft at all. Okay, and then for the phased rollout approach, here we would have a faster timeline to go live, so kind of get those benefits earlier rather than later. So that's in comparison to the big bang approach. Less new functionality for the grants team to learn. And then really their grants team would be more familiar with PeopleSoft as we moved into the billing and AR project. And with the phased approach, we also would be creating a shell contract for phase 2, which would help minimize the conversion that would be required for phase 2. So there would be more work for a phase 2, but most of the configuration and the core structure of the grant would already be there. On the con side, compared to just PC and KK, it would have more modules to license, may have some rework in phase 2, right? So maybe reports would need to be slightly tweaked, or configuration slightly tweaked once you got into that billing and AR phase. And then for this phased option, the billing and revenue would continue to be a manual process until phase 2. So ultimately, Temple did decide to do the phased grants rollout approach. So for their first implementation, we are using the full functionality of grants, project costing, contracts, commitment control, and we have the baseline configuration in for billing and AR, but we are not using the full billing, revenue, and AR processing. So considering they were already manually doing billing and revenue in their old system anyways, that wasn't too big of a change, the fact that they didn't have that system billing and revenue, but definitely they are, especially the revenue piece, they really wanted to push that to phase 1, but we ultimately said, no, it makes most sense to keep it in phase 2. So that was Temple, and coincidentally, the weekend that Temple went live, I also had another grants customer that went live the same weekend, which was the first for me. And they actually, even though they're actually in a different country and have a different scope and needs, they also went down this very same consideration path, initially wanting to limit the modules just to project costing and KK, with the goal to ultimately get to full grants, but to phase it. And they also chose this approach to do the phased with rolling out the functionality for grants, contracts, PC and KK, and putting in that baseline configuration for billing and AR, but then we have not turned on the billing and revenue functionality yet for them either. That will be another phase. Okay, I'm going to pause just a second to see if I have any questions. Looks like we're good so far. Any Any questions you guys want to ask on that before I move on to the final key design decisions? Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. Okay, grants. Oh, Jessica. All right, so for those of you who are new to PeopleSoft grants, this is a screenshot from the proposal page. So PeopleSoft does allow you to track, enter and track your proposals, also track the submission status, whether or not it's been submitted to the sponsor. There are a few required pieces of information when you're entering a proposal, so they're mostly identified with these asterisks. So these first few tabs will have some key required information. But there's a lot of flexibility on how you actually want to structure your proposal and your budget. For example, first decision we have here, budget periods. How many budget periods do you want to create in terms of breaking out your budgets? You'll see for Temple, they have elected to utilize just one budget period, but you'll see we are going to be actually breaking out our budget into multiple budget IDs. You will have at least one project ID, but you could structure it with multiple. And so they're basic information, your title, your PI, your sponsor, which obviously is configurable by you. Purpose is optional, but very helpful for reporting purposes. One thing I want to note for Temple is that they do have another pre-award system, InfoEd. So at this time, once they receive an award, they are entering the proposals manually, either online or Excel, using the Excel to CI. We had planned to have an automated interface from InfoEd into PeopleSoft, but that got deferred to a later phase. So right now it's manual into the proposal pages. Let me go to the next slide. Okay. So now we've jumped over to the budgets tab, and what I'm showing you here is they have actually chosen to structure their budget IDs by grant year. So even though we have an overarching, just one budget period, we will be breaking down the budgets by grant year, and that will become our activity ID in project costing. Lots of different ways about structuring your proposal as well as ultimately your grant. I do like this approach where you have one activity ID per year. Definitely gives you a lot of control around segregating out your billing, your budget, revenue, as well as reporting. But there's multiple different ways to do it. Okay, so they also had been creating budget at a very detailed level in their old system at the account level, and wanted to continue that in PeopleSoft. So we actually talked to them about moving entering of the budget to the post-award side through an upload, which some of our other customers have done too, instead of entering it at a proposal level. So it is a best practice to enter your grant awards in the proposal to bring them over to post-award processing to take advantage of the defaults, which I'll show you in the next slide. So here we were just looking at the proposal pages. We have some minimal information to enter. We have at least one project, our budget IDs, and optionally entering budget, and optionally lots of other opportunities to store grant information on the proposal, but those are not required. And then there is a process to submit and what's called generate an award. You can do these individually, or now through a work center, you can generate multiple. With that, we are able to create for the post-award processing side, an award, a contract, which, as you recall, controls the billing and revenue recognition for the grant. It creates a project and activity, which will be the values that were entered, that are entered on a transaction for our grant to charge our grant. So on the voucher, you'll be putting in not only your PC business unit, but project and activity string. And then lastly, if we had entered a budget on the proposal, that would come over. You can still make changes at any time in post-award. And this is where at this time, Temple has decided we will upload it here because we need to get it very granular. We need to get it at chart field level, so at the account level, and there may be multiple departments that have budgets. So we're at Temple, they're uploading the budget here. You also get on the post-award side lots of other tabs as well. So additional functionality for tracking terms and conditions for your grant. Milestone functionality is great. That allows you to track any milestone that you want to define. It could be for reporting, it could be for billing, it could be for closeout. That's all defined by you. There's a notepad, and then of course, keywords, ability to track award modifications over time. So that's features that are all, you only get that with the grants module. All right, so here's a screenshot of now that they've generated that award. We have, brought forward all of that information that they entered on the proposal, the title, the sponsor, the PI, the purpose, etc. So now into their budget period, we can upload the detailed budget using Excel to CI. Okay, so you'll see they have just decided to upload budget to an account level. That is absolutely not required. Many other customers upload budget at a more summary level. So it could be at kind of an expense grouping level. It could be a very, very high level of just one overall expense account. Lots of different ways to manage your grant. Okay, another key decision that we did spend quite a bit of time on, as any project should do, talking about how they wanted to structure their budgets for commitment control. This they did not actually have commitment control turned on prior to grants, so this was new functionality that was rolled out, and really we only had rules defined for their Fox Chase business unit. But they decided to have two different levels in commitment control that are tracking transactions. This is pretty typical for grants that you have at least two. We have some organizations that do define a third level, but for Temple, we have two. And at the child level, actually, let's talk about the parent, since that's the screenshot here. At the parent higher level, these are all the chart fields that make up their budget string. So when they post the budget, they have these chart fields, and when they transact, it's all going to be recording each of these chart fields. For the parent level, notice they are utilizing a tree. It's called a translation tree. So they're at this level, we are rolling up our transactions using a tree. So while we may transact at a detailed account level, when we are tracking it in commitment control in terms of what's on the remaining budgets, remaining spending authority, it is rolling it up to an expense summary level. And I'll kind of show you an example of that a little bit later. When I look at the child level here, same chart fields, with the exception of, for this account, we are tracking at the detailed account level. Okay, so this we needed at the detailed level for the child because that's how they wanted to post their budget. Okay, so the child we are entering that budget at the account level, but keep in mind in terms of summarization at the parent, it is at a little higher level. In terms of the strictness, so they didn't really want to have hard stops turned on across the board at go live, which many organizations choose. At the child, the more detailed level, it is track only. So that means, hey, I do want to track it for reporting purposes, but I don't want to create any failures if I've gone over my budget. At the parent level, we have a setting with track with budget. Okay, so that's a little bit more stricter. And it's going to say, hey, for this voucher, for example, that you're entering, if you do not have some sort of a budget posted for it, I will fail that transaction. So we are a little stricter here in this, and we wanted that so that we can really have controls around making sure, for example, only valid departments are charging to this grant. Okay, so that's the parent level. And then also, we do have additional lower level controls in place for certain transactions. So there was a need to say, well, generally, I'm okay if we overspend on this grant on the direct cost level. I'm okay with that generally, but not for a particular department. I want to make sure whatever budget that we're giving for this secondary department, that they do not overspend. And to allow for that, they are using the concept of budget attributes. So it's basically a way to override this highest level default settings. Okay, so lots and lots of flexibility in commitment control. Lots of different ways to configure it. It really depends on what your goals are. Also in commitment control, you have the ability, a concept of a calendar. So, for like example, state and local governments, they may want to have each year as a calendar. So you're budgeting to a particular year, or organizations may have operational budgets that are a particular fiscal year. For grants, as you guys may know, they can have so many start and end dates that we really define just a very generic calendar because that concept is very different. It's individual on a grant by grant basis. And then this kind of ties into our phased approach too. So this is a contract, and notice up here in the upper right-hand side, we have the contract status, which is pending. So we've created a shell contract, meaning we have the essential information for beginning to system bill and system revenue, but we have not turned it on yet. That will not come into place until phase 2. So the contracts are there, but they're not activated. If it's in a pending status, it's very easy to make changes to the contract. Once the contract is activated, you have to go through the amendment process to make key contract changes. Okay, so in terms of reporting, we actually did build out quite a few queries, budget to actual queries that allow you to review a grant budget to actuals at a summary level and then drill down using a drilling URL, drill down into the details. But we also needed to create a more traditional report that can be distributed to the PIs. So we created a BI publisher version of a grant expenditure report. This was very similar to their existing report out of their old system. So for this report, we do, it does summarize and display the data at both the detail level and the summary level. So as an example, initially you see the very detailed account level. So we can see we're budgeting once again at that detailed account level. So we see not only our detailed expenditures for the period that you ran the report for, but also inception to date. And then our balance before encumbrances. Here's our encumbrances, and then your final calculation of available budget balance. So that is displayed both at the detailed account level, and then here is where we can also see it at a more summarized level. Our expense groupings are pretty high here. So it's essentially subcontractors, patient care equipment, overhead, and then everything else in our direct expenses. It's a summarized version. And then we have a total for the particular grants of those same buckets. For this BA Publisher grant report, we didn't actually create a custom run control. We're using the delivered query report scheduler. So this is all delivered, and it's essentially using one of those budget to actual queries. And if you go into this update parameters, that's where you can change. It's kind of like changing the run control parameters for the report. Those that have the little asterisk here, those are required. The rest are optional. So we have quite a variety of prompts and ways to run the report. Oh, okay. Lessons learned. Okay, I think I will let me go through the lessons learned, and then I have a couple of questions in the chat. Okay, so lessons learned. So Temple was already live in PeopleSoft and needed to activate some additional chart fields for utilizing the grants management functionality. And so we did have to run chart field configurator, which unfortunately it wasn't perfect. So we did run into some errors running processes where essentially there was indexes that were not updated as a part of running the chart field configurator. So the solution was to update those specific indexes. And also the other grant organization that I said went live at the same weekend, same thing there. They activated some additional chart fields. It wasn't the same ones, but we ran into the very same situation where we needed to update have the tech team work on updating indexes on certain tables. So just be aware of that. When do you turn on commitment control? It is turned on at the installation level. Although I think I mentioned earlier, the rules you define, the budget definitions, those are associated to particular general ledger business units. So when you go through and budget check a transaction, it will say, okay, what's the general ledger business unit? What are the rules specific to that GL, and go through the whole routine. But it does essentially turn budget checking on for the financial system. And since we really only had one business unit that was utilizing commitment control, Temple did decide to have a little enhancement to automatically set transactions to V if they were not a part of our new grants business unit. So at Temple, we implemented one grants business unit. For that grants business unit, we could have multiple business units charge, multiple GL business units charge that grant. That functionality is configured on the project integration template. You can specify which general ledger business units are allowed to charge a particular project. But if you are using, if you have F&A calculated on a grant, there is some additional setup required for those additional GLBUs, even if they're not grants business units. So that is on the grants F&A business units set up. So we did have just one grants business unit, but on the F&A offsets, we did have to set that up for the additional business units. So something to keep in mind if you have multiple business units charging a grant. For reporting, we needed our reporting to be in a format that was both concise and detailed. I would also say summarized and detailed. So the solution was leveraging trees in commitment control to allow the drill down functionality. So both the grant expenditure report that I showed you, as well as our queries, allow for that, and our budget too. So we're posting budget at a detailed level, but summarizing it up for reporting purposes. We needed to control the spending of certain departments while keeping the overall project as tracking with budget. So yeah, we did have some couple of versions of what our commitment control structure was going to look like, and I walked you through the final structure. By utilizing the budget attributes, that was a way for us to not across the board have a control setting, but allow certain strings to not overspend. And then due to certain reporting requirements, budget needed to be loaded at a detail level. So this is where, you know, they had previously budgeted at the account level, wanted to continue that. And so we found it easiest to upload the budget directly on the post-award side to the award using the Excel CI. Okay, so we have one question in the chat. What is the scenario for when to have one proposal and one project versus one proposal and multiple projects? Let me just go back to that screen. Okay, oh, I guess I don't, oh, this might be the best one to look at. Okay, so we see here, it's not the projects tab here, but it is on the budget tab. You can see the project, and you can see in this example, we only have one project. Some of the other examples where I've seen people structure their proposal with multiple projects is if they have a co-PI and they're managing that portion of the budget, they want to separately manage it, and they may have separate approvals for workflow. They may have a separate project ID for either you know, a co-PI. So you're breaking out the money that you have to spend with another PI. Another example I've seen is if you have an external subrecipient and you're wanting to keep those charges separate and in a separate project. Doesn't have to be. A lot of people don't structure it that way, but I have seen people structure it as a separate project ID. And if you know about it up front on the proposal, that is, you know, you have the opportunity to put it there, structure it out there, and structure budget out already at the proposal. But certainly also people add additional projects and additional activities on the post-award side. So that talks about projects, multiple projects on a proposal. The next question is, what about entering multiple budgets for a proposal? Okay, so I think we're getting here. I mentioned that the concept of multiple budget IDs, which does allow you to carve out your budget separately. And this budget ID will turn into an activity ID in post-award. And I should have had one more slide in here that showed the structure of the chart fields for project costing. But if you're implementing project costing, you do not only need to charge just to a project ID, but underneath that, at a minimum, one activity ID. Some organizations simply have just one activity across the board. Many are very happy with it that way. But we have seen a trend to having multiple activities underneath a project, either to represent the grant year or to represent a different source of funds. So those are kind of the key splits that we've seen for activity ID, and budget ID really is that starting point on the proposal. Okay, so you can start it with multiple, like I said, you could have multiple projects, you could have multiple budgets on the proposal, and that gets carried forward to the award, or you can also add it in post-award. So Kaiser Permanente, for example, will be presenting tomorrow together. They keep their proposal a little bit more simpler and say, hey, if I have a need, if I don't have automatic carry forward and I want to set up a new activity ID for my next year, they do that as they're approaching the next year. But other organizations, we've seen it, if they know it's a multi-year award and I need to, there's no automatic carry forward, I want to segregate it into multiple activities, they do it upfront on the proposal. So lots of different options. Okay, I think I got the current questions in the chat, and I have about 10, 12 minutes to go through the last section of the presentation, which is talking about Temple's solution for labor distribution and effort reporting. As you recall, they already had this functionality in the system that they were replacing, so that absolutely needed to be a part of their solution. And at SpearMC, we do have a bolt-on specifically to handle labor distribution and effort reporting. So it is a 100% PeopleTools bolt-on that is very minimally impacted by upgrades and images. So it has its own set of tables that bring in information from financials or other external systems. But as you implement those PUM updates, for the most part, the bolt-on functionality should not be impacted. So it has multiple features that it does: labor cost distribution and effort certification, effort commitments, total professional effort planning. My favorite here is the redistributions. I love the fact of being able to have that control to be able to do a fix, a redistribution, and carry forward that employee level information and have it all integrated. That's a big one for me. There is benefit options for automating benefit calculations, workflow, and some delivered reporting. So for Temple, so there is really three modules, and you get all three with the bolt-on. They are just using the LCD and effort reporting piece of the module of the bolt-on. Okay, once again, I talked through some of this functionality already. The labor cost distribution, allowing you to distribute your payroll based on either a percent or an amount, perform redistributions, create benefit allocations. And really here we have options. We can simply allocate benefits calculated that were calculated in payroll and allocate it out based on a percentage of payroll, or we can configure the system to create a benefits allocation using different benefit categories. And then also it does have options for managing cost share. So both your committed and salary cap cost share requirements. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the pages in the bolt-on. So as I think I mentioned already, so you do have the ability to distribute either by percentage or by dollars. You can have the system automatically calculate salary cap and cost sharing. You can configure how you want this page to look. So this is what's called a distribution profile, where we're telling the system how we want to distribute that payroll. So it can be configured to group by categories of time. Here, so there's typically like 2 or 3 different categories. Here we have non-sponsored activities, which would be, your department charges not going to a project. We have the sponsored projects, which would be, going to a project ID or an external funder. And then your non-sponsored section where it is still charging a project, but is more of a internal funding source. You'll see at the top, we have this approve button. So there is in-system functionality for approving how you want your payroll to be distributed, and the actual workflow approval steps are configured by each organization, and the security, what each person sees on the page, is also configurable. Also have the ability to configure validation rules. So I don't have it in this screenshot, just ability to enter comments here, but a variety of different validation rules. They can be informational, they can be a warning, they could be an error where, hey, we'll allow you to save the page, but you can't continue to approvals until it's fixed. Like, hey, your distribution does not add up to 100%. I'm going to let you save it so you can continue working with it, but I'm not going to let you submit it for approvals. Or there could be even harder validation rules that are always invalid, and I'm not even going to let you save it until you fix it. For example, an individual line, if it's over 100%, well, we know that's always invalid. We're not going to allow you to even save it. Okay. That's the distribution of profile. And just to kind of give you a sense of how the data flows in the bolt-on. So this middle section here is the colored boxes in the middle. Those are the bolt-on pages. It is designed to integrate with PeopleSoft grants. However, that's not a prereq. You do not have to have PeopleSoft grants or projects, for that matter, to use the bolt-on functionality. So the way this works is we configure interfaces to bring in both payroll data and employee data. So that can be from any PeopleSoft source, or any payroll source rather. Payroll or HR source does not have to be PeopleSoft. So we configure the interface to bring payroll in. Here's that distribution profile page that we saw earlier. So once we have approved distributions, we can apply payroll using those distributions, go through a posting process, which creates distribution reports, and then ultimately get sent to a GL staging table. And then, if you're familiar with journal generation, takes that data and journal generates it into the GL. After the journal is edited and posting, at that point, we can take the data and also send it to project costing. Okay, and then if you're using effort certification, there's a process to group and create that certification data. And the effort certification component looks very similar to the distribution profile. And there is a workflow here where you can go through and certify your effort in system. So use screenshots here on just that integration to the GL and PC. So once again, this is for new distributions coming forward, as well as redistributions. We post to the bolt-on GL staging table, journal generate, and then once it is posted, then we collect it into project costing from the bolt-on, which has the detail, right? The employee ID, the pay end date, as well as the journal ID. It makes it very easy for reconciliation purposes. Okay. 3 minutes left here. So quickly mention about the delivered functionality for cost sharing. So there's three different types of cost sharing that you could utilize in the system. Mandatory cost sharing, so that's something mandated, required by the sponsor as a condition of submitting the proposal or accepting the award. And then we have salary cap, so over the cap cost sharing. And then voluntary is really kind of going even above and beyond, not required by the sponsor, but you're wanting to track it. For the salary cap, we do have the ability of a hierarchy, to utilize a hierarchy of obtaining a cap. So it can come from the flow-through sponsor, the sponsor on the award, or it can, the actual salary cap can be listed at an individual project level. And even we can go as low as individual project roles, where a PI role would be subject to a cap at a set amount, whereas a lab tech would not be. So lots of different levels for configuring and obtaining the salary cap. And then even beyond that, so we have the ability to automate this salary or this cost sharing calculation. But we also give you flexibility to just have your own control and simply enter in cost sharing percentages into the distribution profile. And that's actually the approach that Temple has chosen. So for a particular project, so here's our department and then our project ID. Underneath this project, we are actually charging to two different strings. One will be charged to the sponsor and the other one will be charged for cost sharing. So that's one way. Or here's another example where you're entering cost share percentages to have the system do the math for you. Also gives you another look into how you might configure the page. This one is a little bit simpler, less information being displayed, but here we have a 20% cap. Oh, got 1 minute left. And so by going into the effort view, we can see the breakdown of types of salaries. Here's one with salary cap, but no mandatory cost sharing. And then here we have both salary cap plus mandatory cost sharing. So it really handles both of them at the same time. Okay. Let's see, I don't think I'm gonna show you just quickly the rest of the slides. And then we did have one question in the chat about the sort of the gaps in functionality, which necessitated the bolt-on. So for effort certification, like I mentioned, you can also configure what the workflow should be for effort certification. You define what the periods are. So here's Temple's workflow. And then this is the effort certification page, which based on your role will determine what you see. So here's a research administrator view who I can see payroll dollars, but I can't update anything. And then here in the knowledgeable person view, you can actually update the effort percentages, but don't see payroll dollars. So all very configurable. Oh, I am slightly over. So I think I will follow up on your question, Paul, in a follow-up email. But I just wanted to say thank you once again to everybody who attended. And if you have other questions, feel free to reach out and I'll happy to answer them. Thank you so much.